Hey guys, it's Smurfs. Welcome back to Harpies in the Trees, where I review horror books with a supernatural focus. In today's video, I'm going to be going over 11 short stories that I read for the Halloween month. And these stories are pretty cool because 6 of them are classics and 5 of them are contemporary. I thought it would be really fun to put these in a tier list, just sort of gauging like their spookiness and how much of a good read it is for the month of Halloween. If the setting was spooky and eerie, was it scary, that type of thing. So we're going to be doing that today while I review with you also the stories. So we have a lot to talk about, a lot of stories to talk about. Let's jump right in. So all of my classic short stories came from this beautiful book, The Classic Tales of Horror. First story I read was on October 1st, and it was The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. And there was a very specific reason for this. It was because, one, I love that story. I think it is really creepy, very scary. It's just something that, I don't know, just really spoke to me on so many levels. But I decided I wanted to open up the Halloween month with The Black Cat. So this is my second reading through, and The Black Cat to me is like, it's perfect. It is much more scarier than you're anticipating for a story that was written in this time period, which is the late 1800s, and it's kind of shocking in a way, and it's also very human. And I think what I like about The Black Cat is it's like this series of events that could be or might not be supernatural. But the events themselves are so unsettling that even if it wasn't supernatural, it would still be very scary. So The Black Cat is about a man who struggles with alcoholism, and he begins to slip further and further and further into the bottle. And as this is happening, he's becoming more agitated. He's becoming, unhappy, like very aware of what's going on with him, but at the same time, sort of not dealing with it. And one day he has this cat who he actually really adored, but he ends up harming it in a way that was extremely cruel. And after that, the cat seems to hold this sense of judgment. There's this something that this cat knows what's going on with this man. Like he sees it. And him and this cat have this very eerie rapport. And so as time goes on, things get kind of crazier and crazier and more intense until it results in tragedy. So it's super good. I love it. I mean, a lot of people love it. It's very good. I gave it 5 out of 5. I think it's just an extremely great story. Okay, so now we're gonna put them in a tier. It's gonna be based on how spooky they were, like just basically how Halloween-y they are, or how perfect they are for Halloween. So it's not really about like anything else more than that. It's just gonna be a spooky tier, okay? Of course, this for me is like the best. It's like absolutely perfect for Halloween. It's scary. It's great. So that's gonna go up on the S because it's superior. The next story is The Empty House. Now this story was fun. I mean, this was just quintessential haunted house business. It was just so much fun. And what I liked about it are the main characters is this like young man and his old aunt. She seems to have a real thirst for like things that are haunted, and she comes to him and she's like, oh, I got the keys to this house that's like supposedly haunted in town. We have to go check it out. We have to go and do it. And her energy and just like her excitement is so contagious that her nephew is like, oh yes, of course, let's go. I mean, he's also really flattered that she needs him for protection or whatever, but like he's excited too. He's catching the spooky bug. And so they go to this house, and I don't know, they don't really know exactly what they're going to be expecting, but it is not what ends up happening. But it's very atmospheric, it's moody, it's a little funny, and it's it's just a perfect haunted house story. So I don't want to give too much of it away because I think it's a great read and you should definitely read it. But this is another one where I was like 5 out of 5. I just loved it. The characters, both of the characters are really cool, and everything that's happening is just so fun. This one is very spooky. So this is definitely like perfect haunted house story. I mean, we'll put that in the A tier. Afterward by Edith Wharton. And this is another one of those stories where it's not really scary or spooky or anything. It's one of those, it has a thread, an unsettling thread. It's about this couple who are dying to live in a haunted house for whatever reason, right? I mean, I can't blame them. But they finally get this house, and it's really old. It's like Tudor era old. And they're like asking the person who's selling them the house, they're like, oh, is it haunted? And they're like, well, sort of. And they're like, well, what do you mean sort of? It better be haunted. Like, they were like, it better be haunted. And they're like, well, you'll only know if this house is haunted afterwards, after you leave, or way after the fact. And they were just like, that doesn't make any sense. And they were just very disgruntled with that. They did not like that answer whatsoever. But eventually that comes true for them. And it's not anything as, I guess, entertaining or as amusing as I hoped it would be. The story was okay. It's not, this is like the kind of, this is where like, I think I start breaking from like horror in this instance, where like, I'm not too much into this super quiet kind of horror, even though there are times when I do like it. It doesn't get me really excited. I don't think that the story was like really holding my attention in a way that was, you know, going to make me be very committed to what was happening here. So I rated it 3 stars out of 5. Okay, so Afterward. Okay, so you know that I was like whatever with Afterward. So I'm gonna put it in the C section, okay? Like I said, it's not scary, it's not spooky. It's a little eerie, I guess we could say. If you guys remember, I was talking to you about this last year, and there's a new anthology, Lurking in the Dark, that just released yesterday. And I'm also in that one. I did a drawing and I did a short story. So hopefully you can pick it up and grab it and read it. All of the proceeds go to charity, of course, but I decided to read 2 stories out of here because I really plan on reading all of the short stories and I didn't get to that. So the first one I read was Fractals by D.L. Tillery. This story is about a couple who seem to be having some relationship problems, and they end up going on this hiking trip that they had already kind of scheduled before, I guess, things kind of didn't feel exactly weird in their relationship. But they go anyway, and they're not really having a great time. They're fighting, they're arguing, and then the boyfriend ends up missing. This is a monster horror. Monster horror is not really my thing. You know, I like the ghosts and the ghouls and all that kind of stuff. But what I do find entertaining is when couples go on vacation together and they're obviously fighting the whole entire time. And sometimes they're trying to like not fight for the sake of the vacation, but of course, you know, they are. And then all these things kind of go wrong. That's definitely like one of the most natural beginners for a horror story. You know, it's just like you're so caught up fighting with each other that you're probably not even going to notice anything else. Highly dangerous situation. I gave this story 3.5 out of 5. Okay, Fractals. I'm gonna put this in the B section because, I mean, you don't know what happens in that story. It's definitely Halloween-y. It's not spooky though, like, but it's definitely Halloween-y. The next one is Srendi Vashtar by Saki. So this story is about a little boy who is living with his cousin. She's like older, like way older than him. And he's kind of sickly, so he's like sort of a needy child, not because he's needy per se, but because, you know, he requires like some maintenance, I guess. And But she's not cool at all. Like, she sucks. Like, she's just like,
oh, are you having a good time? Let me come ruin it somehow.
You know, she just really gets a lot of joy out of like making this kid unhappy. Like, a few of my teachers from grade school come to mind when I think about this. But yeah, so he despises her. You know, he just wishes more than anything that she just didn't exist. But this boy doesn't have any friends. One of his best friends is a chicken, and he loves that chicken. And it's really cute and kind of sad, but it's very sweet. You know, he treats this chicken so well, and I think because he wants to treat this chicken the way that he would like to be treated. But then he has this other thing in this shed where the chicken where he hangs out with the chicken. There's also something else there, and it's very special to him. And it's very holy to him. And he gets it in his mind one day that he's gonna pray to this thing, and maybe things will change for him. So the story is definitely not creepy or spooky or scary or anything. I think this is a really good example of like what I think most Victorian horror stories sound like, where it's like, it's sort of like normal everyday life, but there's this little thread, you know, this little thread of something kind of unsettling happening. And that's this story. But the story is great. Like, I really enjoyed what happens at the end and just getting to know this kid too. So I gave this one 4 stars. So again, I'm gonna put it in the C. I don't think it's very spooky, and it's not scary. The Horla by Guy de Maupassant. Now this is an interesting one. So this is a story about a man who seems to be a very just typical average person, seems to be very, you know, content with life as it is. But one day he begins to feel differently. He begins to feel like there's something around him that's after him or watching him, and it feels malevolent, you know? And he really starts to kind of be afraid of his own shadow. And as time goes on, he begins to really believe that, you know, there's something here. And one day he sees the pages in a book of his turning by themselves as if someone else is reading it. So then he's very convinced. There's somebody here in my apartment. They're all around me. I can't escape. And he's just really trying to find a way to get this, whatever it is, away from him. So this has a very unique kind of haunting in it. It's not your typical haunting. It's different. And I can't tell you anything about it because I don't want to ruin the story. But it was an interesting way of getting a haunting, I guess you could say, and how this haunting can come to someone who's unsuspecting, and it just sort of attaches itself. And the main character he's so distraught. Like, he's just like freaking out like throughout most of the story, you know, and you feel really bad for him because he's just like at his wit's end, you know, and it's like totally relatable. Like, I would be losing my mind if it was the same thing for me. But this was very fun. I really appreciated this unusual kind of haunting. They do kind of mention in there like where they think it came from and stuff. I won't tell you what it is, so it'll give you something that you might want to look up. So I gave the Horla 3.5 out of 5. All right, the Horla is very spooky. It's very spooky. I put it up here in the A section. Very spooky. All right, it's Black Static by Dane Cobain. This story was fantastic. It was so funny and just unusual and unique. It's about this dad and his 2 daughters who seem to be very well educated on Satan Claus, who he is and, you know, whatever, and how to, you know, prepare to stay safe and all these kind of things, because in this story, in this dimension or whatever, there's no Santa Claus, it's just Satan Claus. And it's written in a way that's really interesting and really unique. It has like fun things like song titles, like for instance, I'm Having a Dreamy Black Solstice by Bling Crowley. Like it has a bunch of that throughout the story. It's very playful and it's very fun and kind of funny. And also this concept of Satan Claus is pretty terrifying, and I just really enjoyed this. This is not something I think I would typically be like, oh yeah, I want to read that. But once I read it, completely just taken with this whole Satan Claus thing. It's just so funny and just so well realized, and everything that's going on is just like so unpredictable and interesting. It also really made me think of like stop motion for some reason. Like maybe it was just calling to mind like Nightmare Before Christmas or something like that. It feels like it would be a perfect companion to Nightmare Before Christmas. So I give this 5 out of 5. It's super cool. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily spooky, but it is definitely Halloween-y. So I'm gonna put it here. Dark Stars is a short story anthology as well. This story is by Priya Sharma and it is called Papa Eye. And this is about a doctor who ends up taking residence on this island. But it's like a weird island because it's like nobody is allowed there. You can only come there if you have permission to do so. He has permission, of course. So he gets there and he is meeting everybody. It's sort of gives a weird vibe though there. It almost feels like a cult or, you know, some kind of like community where they kind of do things a little differently, maybe than traditional science. So he's just getting to know everyone and he begins to realize that there is something weird about this island besides that fact. Mostly that there is this rare form of cancer that is affecting the people there, and that is very unusual and weird to him. So he is going to try and find out what this is about. The story was interesting. It gave me like sort of like Island of Dr. Moreau kind of feeling, a little bit of that vibe there. I thought it was pretty good and well written. I don't think it was enough for me though as a horror lover, so I think I would have wanted more horror. I think it's really walking that line with the Victorian short story. Like some stuff is going on and it's weird, but I wouldn't call it necessarily like super scary or anything. So I give this 3.5 out of 5. It's, you know, like I said, it's like Island of Dr. Moreau kind of thing. I don't even know. It wasn't spooky though. So I'm gonna put it here. I think it's definitely dark though. You know, it's dark. It's just not spooky. It's not spooky. It's not spooky and it's not Halloween-y. Julia by Andrew Cole from Terror in the Trench. I got this from the Abominable Book Box sometime earlier this year, maybe last year, I can't remember. But Andrew Cole also wrote Remains, which I really loved. So I really love his writing. I also interviewed him. If you want to check that out, I will put it up somewhere over here. This is an anthology of horror stories that take place in the ocean, or, you know, the theme of the sea or whatever. So I myself am very much a dark sea horror kind of person, and Julia did not let me down. This story is about a man who has been asked by a friend of his to listen to a recording and to tell him what he thinks he's hearing. And when he takes a listen to it, he definitely knows what he's hearing. He hears a very familiar voice. It's the voice of his wife, Julia. But how could Julia's voice be coming from deep, deep in the ocean? Well, they take a team out to this specific place to try and find the source of this recording to see what is it? Who is it? You know, what's going on? Really, really enjoyed this. It was very scary. It was chilling. It was unsettling. Things about the ocean in this aspect, like when you mix the supernatural with the ocean, I feel like for some reason it's scarier than on land. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the belief that, you know, that water is a conductor, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's that. Who knows? But just this premise was so good and I just enjoyed every moment of it. I thought it was great. So I gave this a 5 out of 5. Julia, absolutely. Yes. The next one I read was from Bitter Chills anthology. This was also an Abominable Box book, and this story was The Burning Boy by Denver Grinnell. This story is about a man who has been seeing something very strange every single year of his life. He sees a boy on fire walking out of the woods. It looks up at him through his window, it waves, it smiles, and then it walks away. And as we get into the story, we get to learn who this burning boy is and why he was on fire. So this was pretty good. I liked the story. It takes place in like a small town with some teenagers and, what they're getting up to and their relationships to each other and how those relationships change after a very specific kind of incident and what the consequences are of that. So I feel like it pulls the dread out really, really well because I think it's this sense of dread that just is really prevalent in this story. So I gave this a 5 out of 5. I thought it was pretty cool. Spooky, absolutely spooky. Like, I feel like the A in the A tier, it's like, these are things that you would, if you were like, tell me a ghost story or something, these would be perfect. The Room in the Tower by E.F. Benson is a really interesting read. It's kind of more of a psychological horror with some supernatural elements, and it's basically about this man who keeps having these reoccurring dreams throughout his life. And it's always like the same dream, but as he gets older, the people in the dreams also seem to get older. But it's always the same situation, the same thing is playing out over and over again. Until one day, he ends up at the house that's in his dreams. This was very cool. It had a surreal quality to it. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily scary, but it was kind of chilling and interesting in the premise and how it's set up and everything. I gave this one 4 out of 5. I wouldn't say it was super spooky though. It's interesting, but it's not spooky to me. So those were all of the short stories that I plan to read for the month of October for my October reading, and I hope you like them. I hope that you get a chance to read these short stories because they are really good. If you liked this video, please like and comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and besides that, please take care of yourselves, look out for each other, and I will see you next time.